I began my spiritual journey with the Brahma Kumaris in London in 1975. And in fact, I grew up in Melbourne in Australia, and I presently live in Sydney in Australia, but I was living and working in London at the time. I had actually been on quite a spiritual journey, and I had lived with all different religious and spiritual groups all over the world. And I settled in London, and I was also visiting so many different religious organizations. And I came across the Brahma Kumaris at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, which is Hyde Park in London. And I was invited to do a meditation course at their main centre in Northwest 10 in London. And I went along and I was taught about myself, about the union with God, and many wonderful things, and it all made a lot of sense to me. And as I was doing the course, I was introduced to Brahma Baba, the founding father of the Brahma Kumaris. Right from the beginning, I really loved his face. His face was extremely kind, very loving, very gentle. But at that point in my life, I did have a little bit of resistance to gurus. I really didn't want to, as I saw it, worship a human being. I wanted to learn from human beings, but I really wanted to have my own connection with God, and not really through a middleman, if I can say that. And so it took me a little bit of time to get used to Brahma Baba. And the more I got to learn about him, I found him such an inspiration. He never said he was God. He would always point to God. He would never allow people to venerate themselves or worship him in any way. He didn't even like photos being taken of him, because he would always say, "Don't remember me, remember the divine, remember God," whom he would always introduce as being the incorporeal, the supreme soul, the Jyoti Bindu, Shiv Baba. And so he would even say also that I'm also making effort to remember God and become pure, which is really the path of Raja Yoga. And so over my 45 years of meditating and practicing, I have developed a relationship with Brahma Baba as well as Shiv Baba, the Supreme Soul. And as I began to learn about his life, I found it really quite inspiring. In 1980, I went to Calcutta, and Brahma Baba had his business there in the 20s and 30s. He had his business in the heart of Calcutta. And I went to the place where he used to have his shop, which was still in pretty much the same condition as when he was there. And in fact, this market, there was many other jewelers there. And when I was there, I met some of them. They spoke so highly of Brahma Baba as a very royal human being, a family man, an absolutely committed devotee, and a very good businessman. But when I was there, I realized that he had lived quite a worldly life. Although he had this yearning to know God, he really was living quite a worldly life. And so when he actually became the instrument of the divine, the instrument of the Supreme, he changed instantly. And all the things that had been important for him, his business, his wealth, his position, his status, he just let them go. It was much more important for him to experience the love of God than all those sort of material or external things. And I just found his sacrifice, his surrender because of his love for God, absolutely inspiring for me. And then only a few years ago, I was in Pakistan, And I was in Karachi. Brahma Baba began his journey and set up the institution of the Brahma Kumaris in Hyderabad. But this was in the mid-1930s. They very soon moved down to Karachi and were based in Karachi for 14 years. So I went to the house where Brahma Baba used to live. It was a very grand house, beautiful old house. And then I went to a building which we know as Kunj Bhavan, where really the first members of the Brahma Kumaris lived. And as far as I'm aware, around 200 sisters lived there. Because right from the beginning, Brahma Baba did quite a radical thing in those days. He put the sisters in front, and until this day, that is still the case in this organization. And I went into this beautiful big house, 3-story, huge house. You could imagine how huge, with 200 people living there. But I was so touched by the atmosphere. The atmosphere I could just feel was an atmosphere of deep love. And I could really feel how the Supreme Soul used Brahma as an instrument, filled him with love, and how he filled everyone around him with love. And my own experience is that this organization has been sustained with that pure love right since the beginning in the mid-1930s. And this pure love of God, the incorporeal Supreme Being, has really just enabled the organization to keep growing. And so being in Karachi and seeing the foundation and seeing the absolute simplicity of Brahma Baba was also very inspiring for me. I've never seen him as a guru. It's God who I see as my father, my mother, my teacher, my guru, the incorporeal Supreme. But I do see Brahma Baba as an extraordinary example of how to transform and become a pure human being. And I feel the thing I learned most of all from Brahma Baba is how to love God. And that when you love God deeply, you are taken beyond so many obstacles, so many problems, so many challenges in life. And this was really the story of Brahma Baba's life. He just fell so deeply in love with God that he became so elevated, and his vibrations transformed all who came in touch with him. So he's always been a real model for me. I don't worship him, but I love him and respect him as an extraordinary example on the spiritual journey. And when he left his body in 1969, he left us with perhaps a summary of his 32 years of this intense, loving relationship with God and what he learned, or the stage which he reached. And that was Nirakari, incorporeal, Nirvikari, viceless, and Nihankari, egoless. And these three words have really been like signposts for me along the way of my own personal journey. And that first word, incorporeal, in English you could say it's like non-physical. And I really loved the way Brahma Baba taught me about who I am. That I am a soul. We all know that. I am a spirit. I am the Atma, the living, the dweller, the consciousness in the body. But he defined it deeply. And he said that the soul is just a point. It exists but has no length, breadth, or width. The soul is so subtle. And I, some years ago, met one of the world's leading physicists, Professor Paul Davies. And he's written many books. And in one of his books, he writes that the point is the ultimate unknowable for science, because it can't be measured. And yet we know that the soul is a point because the soul is incorporeal or non-physical. It's really a wonder. And in a way, the first step of my spiritual journey has been every day, all day for 45 years, unpacking this truth so that I can convert it from a knowing into an experiencing. Because that's really what I see meditation. We can know it and believe it, but how long does it take to experience it, unpack it so you feel it? Because when you really, really deeply feel the reality that I am this soul, then a quality of peace you feel inside radiates through your being. And I have a scientist friend here in Sydney. And one day I was talking to him and he said to me, he got his hand and he banged his hand on his other hand. And he said to me, "Feels solid, doesn't it?" And I said, "Certainly does." He said, "It's 99.99% space." He said, "In fact, your body is like a hologram. And it's the consciousness, the soul, this point that sits in the front of the brain and uses this temporary material thing to act through." And this truth Brahma Baba absorbed absolutely, totally. And I've done so many experiments in the laboratory of my mind. And I really love that because I felt in religion, it was like I could know and believe things, but I love the spiritual path where you educate yourself how to experience the reality that I am a soul. And I've done experiments around the form of the soul just being a point, letting go, withdrawing to the seed. I've done experiments about being eternal. And what I do is I go around for weeks at a time just unpacking that feeling, and I keep asking myself, how does it feel? And the more I do that and I experience that I always exist, I've found the whole account of fear begins to go. Most fear is about loss, and when you experience you always exist, that account starts to have less power over you. But I've done many experiments about being incorporeal. And I love it that I, the point, am a non-physical being in this physical body. This physical body is made up of millions of little building blocks, which we know as atoms and molecules. But I, the soul, am something different. And I've done experiments where for weeks and even months, I've just practiced to feel the feeling of being non-physical. And you know what the result has been? I feel less influenced. I'm living in this world, I'm responsible in this world, I'm participating in this world, in relationships, but I don't feel so influenced, because when I feel incorporeal, the things of the corporeal don't impact my mind. And it's a wonderful feeling to be in this world but detached from the influence of this world. And this is really, I think, an incredible thing that Brahma Baba has taught me, how to really experience the reality of myself as being non-physical. The second one I'd love to talk about is really being egoless. And in a way, I found that being incorporeal actually transforms my relationship or heals my relationship with the material world. But being egoless heals my relationship with other souls. I'm living and interacting with so many different people. And Brahma Baba taught always that you are the eternal soul and that each one is your brother soul. We're not even male or female. Yes, the image of the body carries that, but the soul has no gender. I really love that very deeply. But once he was saying, for real spiritual progress, to become egoless, let go the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment and emerge the eye of soul consciousness. And sometimes I feel it's like a power struggle inside between the three eyes. You know, my ego on the one hand, my lack of self-respect or my ego of inferiority, and my true self, the soul. Which one is more powerful inside of me? And it's really like Brahma Baba was able to really master himself and become truly soul conscious. And when I'm soul conscious, I'm egoless, and that has a huge impact on relationships. And so I began to experiment with this, and I began to see these three personalities. The first one, my ego, which is born out of thinking I'm a temporary body. The parent of ego is identifying with my temporary body and all its labels. And when it's there, I compare with others and I think I'm better, I know more, I am right. But when it comes into my feelings, that's when I feel so easily insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded. And so my ego has a massive effect on my relationships, a very negative effect. In fact, I often feel there's a deep relationship between ego and love. The more ego I have, the less love I experience in life. The role of ego is to make you feel separate. You feel different. You feel you don't belong. You feel it's reality, but it's a creation of my own thinking. And that's really a cover for the second eye, as Baba called it, the eye of disheartenment. And this is another form of ego, but the ego of inferiority. It also comes when I think I'm a temporary body. And I compare and I feel I'm worse than, not good enough, inferior, etc. And so when I start to think of myself as, the eye of inferiority, the eye of lack of self-respect, when it comes into my feelings, I feel hopeless, inadequate, unworthy, all these feelings, when you feel completely lost and down. And often what happens is we fluctuate. And what Brahma Baba did is he identified that when I really practice the third eye, the eternal self, the soul, you actually don't have to try and deal with your ego or deal with your lack of self-esteem or self-respect. Automatically, when you practice soul consciousness, you let go the ego of the body, whether superior ego or inferior ego. And the more I'm egoless, I'm lovable. The expression of soul consciousness is self-respect. And the expression of self-respect in action is humility. Brahma Baba was the absolute embodiment of humility. So first of all, he became incorporeal, and he felt he was living in this world completely uninfluenced by this world. Secondly, he really became egoless, and the more egoless, the more you will naturally win hearts. And there's like all the barriers of difference are removed, and it's like your heart, you have such a big heart that the whole world can fit in your heart. It doesn't matter how different they look or what different things they believe in. It's like my whole world I can accept the whole world in my heart. And then the third was becoming viceless or pure. And really, Brahma Baba was an incredible example of purity, if I can say. And, often I think, how can I come close to God? How can I come close to God? It's actual purity that enables me to really feel close. Impurity is that thing that makes me feel at a distance. And so if God is eternally pure, God is the one who's never influenced, who remains eternally unblemished and pure. If I want to come close, I've got to increase my own purity. And this is why Brahma Baba was an extraordinary example of a man who'd had a family, a man who'd been in business, a man who'd experienced the world. But once he recognized God, he really realized that if I want to come close to God, I have to create this depth of purity in myself. And really, impurity is about influence, but purity is really the main thing that makes me or enables me to really experience the love of God. And what is purity? To me, purity is the fragrance when I base my whole life on truth. When I base my thinking, my speaking, my behavior, my interactions with others on truth, everything true, then the fragrance that comes in my life, the perfume that comes out of that truth is purity. And to me, the truth that I need to base my life on, that everything I do is influenced by three truths perhaps: that I am the eternal soul, that the one relationship that's permanent is with the Supreme Being, the Supreme Soul, Shiv Baba, and thirdly, that all other souls, all others are souls like me, and I have a relationship with them as a soul. These things are eternal. And when I base my life on that which is true and that which always exists, then I start to recreate the atmosphere of purity in myself. What does that do to me? I start to really like who I am. The more that you observe yourself performing true actions, treating people well, you like who you are. It improves your own sense of self-value and your own sense of self-respect. And the more you're pure, you feel automatically loved and close to God. And so I really practice these things, and I really try to give the highest love and respect to all people, but not be attracted or influenced by them. There's a difference between giving respect and not really taking on influences of opinions and ideas, but just maintaining my respect. Because my prime relationship in life is with the Supreme Soul. And this is really at the heart of what I've learned from the life of Brahma Baba. And so Brahma Baba really taught me how to experience myself to be incorporeal, the non-physical. And that really has taught me not to be influenced, not to absorb from around me. He taught me to go on the journey of egolessness, and without doubt, my relationships with all people around me have improved. And I notice the more that humility comes into life, the more love comes into our lives too. But also that purity, the more there's purity in life, I feel loved by God, I love God, and I can take so much power from God to continue to change myself and transform myself. So in January of each year, the Brahma Kumaris don't celebrate January, which was the month where Brahma Baba left his body. We don't sort of worship him or venerate him, but we remember him to be inspired by his life so that I can change too. And so this is a month where we often have special meditation to strengthen myself. And seeing our world changing so fast, I think the most important thing for all of us at this time is to really practice practice my truth, practice my spirituality, make myself strong, and that will help me and my family in this very uncertain world in which we live. Thank you so much. Om Shanti.